I found out my best friend betrayed me, and it destroyed everything I thought I knew. When I look back, I still can't figure out the exact moment it all started to fall apart. Maybe it was subtle like a crack in the foundation that you don't notice until the whole building collapses. Or maybe it was staring me in the face the entire time, and I just refused to see it. Either way, it came down to the one person I trusted more than anyone else. My best friend, Eric. Eric and I met in 7th grade. He was the kid who made everyone laugh, the class clown, who somehow never got in trouble. I was quieter, more reserved, the type of kid who sat in the back of the room and prayed the teacher wouldn't call on me. We couldn't have been more different, but we clicked almost instantly. By high school, we were inseparable. Everyone knew us as Eric and Sam, like we were some kind of package deal. For years, Eric was my rock. He had this way of making life feel less heavy, less overwhelming. Whether it was a late-night phone call when I was stressing about exams or just cracking jokes to cheer me up, he always seemed to know exactly what I needed, and I like to think I was there for him too. I listened when he vented about his dad walking out, when he failed his first driving test, when he broke up with his first girlfriend. We had each other's backs, or at least, that's what I thought. Fast forward to adulthood. Eric and I ended up working together at the same Campania, mid-sized marketing firm in Chicago. It wasn't planned, but when Eric saw the job posting, he convinced me to apply with him. "Come on," he said. "We'll crush it together." Just like old times. At first, it was great. Working with your best friend. It felt like a dream. We'd grab lunch together, bounce ideas off each other, and even stay late sometimes, joking around as we tackled deadline. But as the months went on, I started to notice little thin subtle shifts that I couldn't quite put my finger on. Eric became more competitive. He'd make comments about my work like, "You're really gonna present that to the client?" Or, "Man, I'd hate to be in your shoes if this campaign flops." At first I brushed it off as harmless teasing. That was just Eric, right? He loved to poke fun. But the comments started to sting more and more. And then there was the promotion. Our manager announced a new senior position was opening up, a big step up with a hefty pay raise. Both Eric and I were in the running for it, and honestly, I thought it would come down to who had the better presentation. I worked my ass off preparing for it, staying late at the office, skipping out on weekend plans, barely sleeping. Eric, on the other hand, seemed oddly relaxed. I figured he was just confident after all. That was Eric. Confidence was his thing. The day of the presentation came, and I felt good about mine. I didn't nail every single word, but I thought I made a solid case for why I deserved the promotion. Eric's presentation was flashy, sure, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was overcompensating for weaker ideas. A week later, the announcement came. Eric got the promotion. I was crushed, but I congratulated him. That's what friends do, right? I figured I'd just work harder next time, but then I overheard something that changed everything. I was staying late at the office again, trying to finish up a project, when I heard voices coming from one of the conference rooms. It was Eric and our manager, Karen. I wasn't eavesdropping, at least, not at first, but then I heard my name. "Sam's great and all," Eric was saying, his voice low. "But let's be honest, this not cut out for a leadership role. He's too cautious, too indecisive. You need someone who can make bold moves, someone who isn't afraid to take risks." Karen laughed. "Well, you certainly made a strong case for yourself." That personal email thread you forwarded was an eye-opener for sure. My blood ran cold. What personal email thread? What the hell were they talking about? I waited until they left before I slipped into the conference room. My hands were shaking as I logged onto the computer Eric always used. It didn't take long to find the email thread. It was a series of messages between me and one of our clients' messages I'd thought were private. Eric had forwarded them to Karen, cherry-picking lines that made me look bad. He'd twisted my words, taking things out of context to paint me as incompetent and unprofessional. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. This was Eric, my best friend, the guy who'd been my brother in all but blood, and he'd stabbed me in the back. I didn't confront him right away. I needed time to process what I'd found, but the more I thought about it, the angrier I got. This wasn't just about the promotion, it was about everything. The little digs, the competition, The way he'd been acting ever since we started working together. It all made sense now. Eric hadn't been my friend in a long time. I just hadn't wanted to see it. When I finally did confront him, he didn't even try to deny it. "Look, Sam," he said, "it's not personal. It's just business. You've got to understand this was a big opportunity for me. I couldn't let it slip away." "Not personal," I repeated, my voice shaking with rage. "You sabotaged me, Eric. You lied to our boss. You went behind my back. And you call that not personal?" He shrugged, like it was no big deal. "Come on, man. You'd have done the same thing if you were in my shoes." That was the moment I realized I didn't know Eric at all. The person standing in front of me wasn't my best friend. He was a stranger, someone I couldn't trust, someone I didn't want in my life anymore. After that conversation, I cut Eric out of my life completely. I stopped having lunch with him at work, ignored his attempts to chat, and avoided him at all costs. At first it felt like the right move, like I was reclaiming control over my life. But the fallout from Eric's betrayal didn't stop at our friendship. At work, things got complicated fast. Eric's promotion meant he was now technically my superior, and he didn't waste any time asserting that authority. Suddenly my projects were being nitpicked to death. My deadlines were shortened, and every move I made seemed to be under a microscope. It was like he was punishing me for standing up to him, and I hated that he still had this kind of power over me. But I wasn't going to let him win. Not this time. I started documenting everything, every passive-aggressive email, every unreasonable demand, every instance of Eric undermining me in front of the team. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about protecting myself. If Eric was going to play dirty, I needed to be ready. Around this time, I also started reconnecting with some of our co-workers. I'd always been friendly with them, but Eric had a way of dominating the room, and I guess I'd let him overshadow me even at work. Now though, I was realizing that I wasn't as alone as I thought. Turns out I wasn't the only one who had issues with Eric. One co-worker, Rachel, confided in me that Eric had taken credit for her ideas in meetings more than once. Another, Tom, mentioned that Eric had thrown him under the bus during a client call to save face. Piece by piece, a picture was forming. Eric's climb up the corporate ladder wasn't just built on hard work and charm. It was built on stepping over anyone who got in his way. With their support, I decided to take my documentation to HR. It wasn't an easy decision. Confronting a friend is one thing, but taking formal action at work is another. I knew there was a risk it could backfire, that Eric might find a way to twist the narrative. But I couldn't keep living like this, constantly on edge, wondering when the next blow would come. The HR meeting was nerve-wracking. I laid out everything I hate: emails, messages, witness accounts, and explained how Eric's behavior was affecting not just me, but the entire team. The HR rep listened carefully, taking notes and asking questions. At the end of the meeting, she assured me that they would investigate the matter thoroughly. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. The investigation took weeks, and during that time, things got even tenser at work. Eric must have sensed that something was up, because he started acting even more aggressive, calling me out in meetings, criticizing my work in front of clients, and generally making my life a living hell. But I held my ground. I wasn't going to let him scare me into backing down. And then, one Friday afternoon, I got called into a meeting with HR. My stomach was in knots as I walked into the conference room, where the HR rep was waiting with Karen, our manager. Eric wasn't there. First of all, the HR rep began. "I want to thank you for bringing these concerns to our attention. After a thorough investigation, we've determined that Eric's behavior has indeed been inappropriate and unprofessional." I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but it was quickly followed by anger. Inappropriate and unprofessional? That felt like such an understatement for everything he'd done. As a result, she continued, Eric will be removed from his managerial position, effective immediately. He will also be placed on probation, with mandatory training sessions to address his conduct. I wanted to feel triumphant, but instead, I felt hollow. Eric wasn't being fired. He was being given yet another chance, a chance he didn't deserve. When I got back to my desk, Eric was packing up his things. He glanced at me, his expression unreadable. For a moment, I thought he might say something, an apology, an excuse, anything. But he just shook his head and walked away. I should have felt victorious. I'd stood up to him, exposed him for what he was, and put an end to his reign of terror at work. But instead, I felt empty. Eric had been my best friend for years. I'd trusted him, confided in him, shared some of the best moments of my life with him. And now? Now he was just a stranger I used to know. Life went on after that. Work got better, calmer, less toxic. I started feeling more confident in myself, more willing to step into the spotlight and show what I was capable of. But every now and then, I'd catch myself thinking about Eric. I'd wonder if he ever regretted what he'd done, if he ever missed the friendship we used to have. I don't think I'll ever truly understand why he did what he did. Maybe it was jealousy, or insecurity, or just plain selfishness. Or maybe he was never the person I thought he was. But one thing's for sure, I won't let his betrayal define me. I'm stronger than that. I have to be. Eric's betrayal left a deep scar in my life. But the truth is, scars have a way of reminding you, not just of the pain, but of how you've survived it. Cutting him out of my life wasn't the end of the story, it was the beginning of a new chapter. And with every step I took away from the shadow of Eric's actions, I found myself growing stronger. In the months that followed, I poured myself into work. With Eric no longer in a position of power, I felt like I could finally breathe again. My confidence started to come back, and I began taking on bigger projects, volunteering for leadership roles, and even presenting ideas directly to Karen without hesitation. It felt good, like I was reclaiming parts of myself that Eric had tried to bury. But work wasn't the only thing that changed. I also started reconnecting with old friends, the ones I drifted away from during my years of being Eric and Sam. At first, it was awkward. Some of them were understandably hesitant, wondering if I'd gone back to being the same person who always put Eric first. But as time went on, they saw the changes in me. I wasn't that person anymore. One of those old friends was Jenna. We'd been close in college, but Eric never liked her. He said she was too serious, too judgmental, and somehow I'd let his opinions cloud my own. Looking back, I realized that Eric had resented anyone who could see through him, and Jenna definitely did. When I reached out to her, she was surprised but receptive. We started meeting up for coffee every few weeks, and those conversations became a lifeline for me. Jenna didn't sugarcoat things. She told me straight out that I needed to stop letting Eric live rent-free in my head, and she was right. By the time a year had passed, I hardly thought about Eric anymore. I was thriving at work, surrounded by supportive colleagues, and my social life was better than it had been in years. But life has a way of testing you, even when you think you've finally found peace. One day, out of the blue, I got a call from Rachel's coworker who'd confided in me about Eric taking credit for her ideas. She sounded nervous, almost frantic. "Sam," she said, "you need to know something. Eric's back." I echoed, my stomach sinking. "What do you mean?" "He's been hired by one of our competitor firms," Rachel explained, "and he's already trying to poach clients. I thought you should hear it from me before the rumors start flying." I don't know why I was surprised. Eric had always been good at bouncing back, no matter how many bridges he burned along the way. But the thought of him working for a competitor potentially sabotaging me and my team made my blood boil. I spent the next few weeks on high alert, carefully monitoring our client relationships and keeping an ear out for any whispers of Eric's interference. Sure enough, it wasn't long before the rumors started. One of our biggest clients, a tech startup with a lot of potential, began expressing concerns about the cost of our services. At first, I thought it was just the usual back and forth that comes with contract negotiations. But then during a meeting, one of their representatives let something slip. "Well," she said, glancing at her colleagues, "we've been hearing some interesting offers from other firms lately. Eriku, this other rep we've been in touch with seems to think he can do better." I froze. There it was. Eric's name spoken aloud. He wasn't just working for a competitor, was actively trying to steal our clients. I knew I couldn't let this slide, but confronting Eric directly wasn't an option. I needed to handle this carefully, strategically. So I decided to focus on what I could control, strengthening our relationships with our clients and proving why our firm was the better choice. I worked tirelessly over the next few months, pouring my energy into client meetings, crafting innovative proposals, and ensuring that every interaction left a positive impression. Slowly but surely, the tide began to turn. Clients who'd been wavering started reaffirming their commitment to our firm, and even new opportunities began to emerge. Meanwhile, I kept tabs on Eric's firm through industry news and whispers from mutual contact. From what I heard, his tactics were wearing thin. Some clients were beginning to see through his charm and question his promises. It wasn't long before his reputation took another hit, and his firm began losing ground. The day I heard that Eric's firm had lost its biggest client, I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. But it wasn't just about winning, it was about proving to myself that I could rise above his games and thrive on my own terms. Looking back, I realized that Eric's betrayal taught me something valuable: the importance of trusting myself. For years, I'd let him overshadow me, manipulate me, and make me doubt my own worth. But now I know better. Eric may never change, but I don't need him to. I've changed, and that's enough. Eric's story wasn't over, and neither was mine. Although I thought I'd put him behind me, he continued to linger at the edges of my life, a reminder of the choices I'd made and the lessons I'd learned. And then one day, the final chapter unfolded in a way I never could have predicted. It started with a phone call. Not from Eric this time, but from Jenna. By now, she and I had become close again, closer than we ever were in college. She was the kind of friend who told it like it was, but always with kindness, and I appreciated that more than she knew. When she called, her voice was tinged with concern. "I don't know how to tell you this," she began, "but I ran into Eric." I froze. "Where?" "At a coffee shop downtown," she said. "He didn't see me, but Sam, he looked rough, like really rough. I overheard him talking to someone about how he's out of work again, struggling to pay rent." It sounded bad. Part of me wanted to dismiss it or say, "Well, he made his bed, now he has to lie in it." But another part, the part that still remembered the good times, couldn't help but feel a pang of pity. No matter how much he'd hurt me, I didn't wish this kind of hardship on anyone. For days, I wrestled with whether or not to reach out to him. Jenna's words kept replaying in my mind, and I hated the idea of Eric hitting rock bottom without anyone to pull him up. But at the same time, I couldn't forget what he'd done. I couldn't just pretend the betrayal never happened. Finally, I made a decision. I wasn't going to offer Eric a handout or a free pass, but I was willing to meet him one last time to hear him out and see if it truly changed. If nothing else, it would give me closure. We met at yet another diner, though this one was farther from work, in a quieter part of town. Eric was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with his shoulders hunched and his face buried in his hands. When he looked up, I barely recognized him. The confident, charismatic Eric I'd known was gone, replaced by someone who looked defeated and worn. "Sam," he said, his voice hoarse. "Thanks for coming." I nodded, sliding into the seat across from him. "Jenna told me you were struggling. What's going on?" Eric sighed deeply, running a hand through his unkempt hair. "He screwed up again. Lost the job, burned through my savings, and, well, I'm barely keeping a roof over my head." "What happened?" I asked, though I could already guess the answer. He hesitated, then admitted, "Same old story. I thought I could cut corners, make a quick buck, and it blew up in my face. I don't know why I keep doing this, Sam. It's like I can't help it." His words hit me harder than I expected. For the first time, Eric sounded genuinely remorseful, not just for what he'd done to me, but for the choices he'd made in his own life. As much as I wanted to help him, I knew I couldn't fix Eric's problems for him. That was a lesson I'd learned the hard way. So instead, I offered him advice. The kind of advice he probably didn't want to hear. "You need to start over," I said firmly. "And I don't mean switching jobs or moving to a new city. I mean really starting over. Take a good hard look at yourself and figure out why you keep making these choices. Get help if you need it. Therapy, support groups, whatever it takes. But you have to do the work, Eric. No one can do it for you." Eric nodded slowly, his eyes downcast. "You're right. I don't know if I can." "You can," I said, my tone softer now. "But you have to want it. And you have to stop hurting the people who care about you. That's the first step." We talked for a while longer, and by the time we left the diner, I felt lighter. I don't know if Eric will ever truly change, but I do know that I've done everything I can to help him. The rest is up to him. As for me, I'm moving forward. I'm letting go of the anger, the pain, and the disappointment. Eric will always be a part of my story, but he doesn't define. I do. Eric's departure from my life wasn't a clean break. As much as I wanted to move forward, his presence lingered like a shadow, not because I missed him, but because his betrayal had reshaped the way I saw relationships, trust, and even myself. And while I was determined to put him behind me, life had other plans. About 6 months after our diner meeting, I ran into Jenna at a networking event. By then, she and I had grown incredibly close, more than friends even. Though neither of us had explicitly called it a relationship, there was something undeniable in the way we understood each other, supported each other, and simply felt at ease together. The event was in a sleek downtown office building, all glass and steel, the kind of place where people came to sip cocktails and exchange business cards. Jenna and I had just finished chatting with a potential client when she leaned closer, her voice low. "Sam," she whispered, "don't freak out, but Eric's here." My stomach dropped. "What?" She nodded toward the far side of the room, where Eric stood with a drink in hand, chatting with a group of people I didn't recognize. He looked better than he had at the diner, more polished, more composed, but the sight of him still sent a jolt through me. "Do you want to leave?" Jenna asked, her hand brushing against my arm. I shook my head. "No, I'm not running away from him." For the rest of the evening I tried to ignore Eric, but it was impossible. He caught sight of me within minutes and spent the next hour occasionally glancing in my direction, as if waiting for an opportunity to approach. Jenna stuck close to me, her presence steady and reassuring, but my nerves were on edge. Finally, Eric made his move. He waited until Jenna stepped away to talk to someone, then walked up to me with a faint smile. "Sam," he said, his tone deceptively casual, "it's good to see you. I didn't bother pretending to feel the same." "Eric," he hesitated, then sighed. "Look, I know you don't want to hear this, but I've been thinking a lot about what you said at the diner, about starting over, doing the work. And you were right." I raised an eyebrow. "So what? You want a gold star?" "No," he said quickly. I wanted you to know that I'm trying. For real this time." I didn't respond right away. Part of me wanted to believe him, but another part that remembered all the lies was skeptical. Finally, I said, "Trying isn't enough, Eric. You've burned a lot of bridges, and it's going to take more than words to rebuild them." "I know," he said softly, "but I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted to say thank you." His sincerity caught me off guard, and for a moment I saw a glimpse of the Eric I used to know. Friend who laughed with me, supported me, and felt like family. But it was just a glimpse, and I wasn't ready to trust it. Eric didn't linger after that. He walked away without waiting for me to respond, leaving me with mixed emotions I couldn't untangle. Jenna returned a few minutes later, and though she didn't press me for details, her presence helped ground me again. As we left the event that night, I realized something important. Eric's journey was his own, and I couldn't control or predict the outcome. But my journey was mine, and I had the power to shape it the way I wanted. And that's exactly what I intended to do. After the networking event, I made it a point to push Eric further from my thoughts. If he was genuinely trying to turn his life around, good for him, but I couldn't let his story interfere with mine. Jenna, always perceptive, helped me stay focused. She reminded me that while forgiveness can be healing, it doesn't mean forgetting or letting someone hurt you again. But despite my efforts to move forward, Eric's shadow loomed larger than I expected. 3 months later, our firm landed a major client, a national retail chain, looking to overhaul their branding. It was the biggest contract I'd ever worked on, and Karen put me in charge of leading the project. The stakes were high, but I felt ready. After everything I'd been through, I wanted to prove not just to the company, but to myself that I was capable. The project was going smoothly until I discovered that Eric's firm was also bidding for the chain's advertising and social media campaign. It shouldn't have surprised me, but the thought of competing directly against him sent my mind racing. What if he tried to sabotage me again? What if his charm won over the client despite everything? Jenna's advice echoed in my head. Focus on your own work. Trust yourself. So I did. I threw myself into the project with everything I had: late nights, brainstorming sessions, and countless revisions until every detail felt perfect. I didn't let myself worry about Eric's firm or their tactics. I couldn't control them, but I could control how I represented myself and my team. The day of the pitch presentation arrived, and I felt a mix of nerves and excitement. The client's executives were seated around a sleek conference table, their faces neutral as they waited for the presentations to begin. Eric's firm went first. Eric himself led the pitch, his usual charisma on full display. His slides were polished, his delivery smooth, and his ideas, while flashy, felt thin when you scratched the surface. As he spoke, I reminded myself to stay calm. Whatever happened, I had my own strengths. When it was my turn, I focused on what mattered: authenticity, creativity, and results. My team's ideas were rooted in research, backed by data, and tailored to the client's goals. I spoke with confidence, drawing on the passion I felt for the project and the trust I'd built within my team. By the time I finished, the executives were nodding, exchanging glances that told me we'd struck a chord. A week later, we got the news. Our firm won the contract. Karen called a meeting to celebrate, and as she thanked me for my leadership, I felt a surge of pride. Not just for the victory, but for how far I'd come since Eric's betrayal. Months passed, and life moved forward. I advanced in my career, strengthened my relationship with Jenna, and continued to grow in ways I never thought possible. Eric's presence faded further and further, until he was little more than a distant memory, a chapter in my story that I'd learned from but didn't dwell on. And then, one day, I received an email. It was from Eric. The email was short, almost hesitant. He congratulated me on my recent successes, mentioned that he'd heard about the retail chain project, and said he was impressed. But what stood out most was the final line: "I know I've hurt you more than I can ever make up for, but I want you to know how much I've learned from our mistakes. I'm trying to be better. Thank you for always holding me accountable even when I didn't want to hear it. You're stronger than I ever was." I stared at the screen, my emotions swirling. Was this his way of apologizing? Was it genuine? I didn't know, and maybe I didn't need to. Eric's words wouldn't change the past, but they reminded me of how far I'd come and how much I'd grown. I never replied to Eric's email, not because I was angry or bitter, but because I didn't need to. His story was his own, and mine was mine. I'd closed that chapter, and I wasn't looking back. The lessons I'd learned, the importance of trust, resilience, and self-worth, would stay with me forever. Eric may have been a part of my journey, but he didn't define it. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly free. Update 1. 6 months later, it's been 6 months since I received Eric's email, and life has moved forward in ways I never anticipated. Jenna and I officially started dating, though in many ways, it felt like we'd been together for years. She's my rock, a constant source of wisdom and support, and our relationship is the healthiest thing I've ever experienced. Work has been steady too. Karen recently hinted that I'm in line for another promotion, and while I'm not counting on it, I can't help but feel proud of how far I've come. The memories of Eric and his betrayal still cross my mind from time to time, but they don't carry the same weight they used to. I've learned to let go. Or at least I thought I had. Last week, I saw Eric again, this time purely by accident. Jenna and I were grabbing lunch at a cafe near our apartment when he walked in, looking as disheveled as he did at the diner months ago. He didn't see us, and for a moment, I thought about ignoring him. But Jenna squeezed my hand and gave me a knowing look. "You should talk to him," she said softly. "Not because you owe him anything, but because it might help you close the door for good." I hesitated, but eventually nodded. Jenna stayed at the table while I approached Eric, who was hunched over a cup of coffee like it was the only thing keeping him upright. "Eric," I said, my voice steady. He looked up, startled, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of the charm he used to wield so effortlessly. But it faded quickly, replaced by an expression I couldn't quite read: embarrassment maybe, or regret. "Sam," he said, his voice weak. "What are you doing here?" "Just grabbing lunch," I replied. "Are you okay?" He laughed bitterly. "Define? Okay. I'm still out of work, still scraping by. Guess I'm paying for all those mistakes you warned me about." His words weren't accusatory, but they stung nonetheless. I sat down across from him, unsure of what to say. Part of me wanted to walk away, but another part, the part that still cared, no matter how much I hated it, wanted to listen. Have you done anything to fix it? I asked finally. Therapy? Support groups? He shook his head. No, it ain't. It's not that simple, Sam. You don't understand. Maybe not, I said. But you can't keep using that as an excuse. You have to start somewhere. We talked for a while, and though Eric wasn't ready to take real action, I left the cafe feeling lighter. Not because I'd fixed anything, far from it, but because I finally understood that his journey was separate from mine. I didn't need to carry his burdens anymore. Update 2. 1 year later, a year has passed, and the distance between Eric and me has only grown. I haven't heard from him, and I haven't gone out of my way to check in. Jenna and I moved into a new apartment, and I've taken on a senior position at work only that Eric once fought for but never earned. Life feels stable, happy, and full of possibility, but Eric's shadow still lingers, if only faintly. Last week, I got a call from Rachel, the co-worker who first told me about Eric's schemes. She'd run into him at a charity event and said he looked different. He's volunteering, she said, her voice almost incredulous, at a shelter downtown. I talked to him for a minute, and he told me he's been going to therapy, trying to turn things around. He even apologized for everything. Rachel paused, as if waiting for me to respond. But I didn't know what to say. Was this real? Had Eric finally changed? Or was this just another act, another attempt to win sympathy? Sam? Rachel said gently. I think he really meant it. He seemed sincere. I haven't reached out to Eric, and I'm not sure if I will. Maybe he's truly changed, or maybe he's not. Either way, his story isn't mine to carry anymore. I've made my peace with the past, and I'm focused on the future, the one I've built for myself, with Jenna by my side and the lessons I've learned as my guide. Eric will always be a part of my story, but he doesn't define. And that, I think, is the greatest closure I could ever ask for. 3 years had passed since I last saw Eric at the cafe. Life had settled into a rhythm, the kind of steady, fulfilling pace I used to dream about. Jenna and I had gotten married the previous spring in a small ceremony with close friends and family. Work was going well, and though it brought its challenges, I felt confident in my ability to handle them. For the first time, I felt like I'd built something unshakable. Then one day, I received a letter in the mail. Not an email, not a text, but an actual handwritten letter. The envelope had no return address, but the handwriting on the front was unmistakable. It was Eric's. I hesitated before opening it, memories rushing back in waves. Part of me wanted to toss the letter aside, to avoid reopening wounds I thought had healed. But curiosity got the better of me. I carefully unfolded the paper and began to read. Sam, I don't even know if you'll read this, but I had to try. I've written and rewritten this letter 100 times, trying to figure out the right words, but there's no easy way to say it. I owe you an apology. Not just for what I did to you at work, but for everything, for taking advantage of your friendship, for letting you down over and over again, and for never truly owning up to my mistakes. I've spent the last few years trying to rebuild my life, and part of that has meant facing the person I used to be. It hasn't been easy, and I know I still have a long way to go, but I'm trying. For once, I'm really trying. Therapy has helped, and so has volunteering at the shelter. It's given me a sense of purpose I didn't think I'd ever find again. I don't expect forgiveness, Sam. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I'm grateful for everything you taught me. Even if it came at the cost of our friendship. You were right about so many things, and I was too blind to see it at the time. Thank you for never sugarcoating the truth, even when I didn't want to hear it. I hope you're happy, Sam. You deserve to be. I'll always wish you the best. Eric. I sat with the letter in my hands for what felt like hours, my emotions a tangled web of nostalgia, sadness, and closure. It didn't erase what Eric had done, but it felt like an acknowledgement of the pain he'd caused, not just to me, but to himself. And maybe, just maybe, it was the final piece I needed to let go of the past completely. I didn't write back, not because I was angry, but because I didn't feel the need to. Eric's letter felt like an ending and a new beginning for both of us. 5 years later, my life looks nothing like I imagined it would when I was younger. Jenna and I now have a daughter, Lily, who just turned 2. She's the light of our lives, a whirlwind of curiosity, and giggles that makes every day feel like an adventure. Parenthood has taught me more about patience and love than I ever thought possible. Work is steady, but it's no longer the center of my world. After years of climbing the corporate ladder, I realized that my happiness didn't lie in promotions or accolades. Instead, I found fulfillment in mentoring younger colleagues, helping them navigate the challenges of their careers while maintaining their sense of self. As for Eric, I haven't heard from him again. Sometimes I wonder how he's doing, if he's still volunteering, if he's found peace, if he's truly changed. But those thoughts don't consume me anymore. They're fleeting, like a distant echo that fades as quickly as it comes. What stays with me are the lessons I've learned from my journey, the importance of setting boundaries, the power of resilience, and the value of surrounding yourself with people who lift you up rather than tear you down. Eric may have been a part of my story, but he no longer defines it. I've built a life that is mine, filled with love, purpose, and hope for the future. And that, I think, is the true happy ending. If you like this video, please subscribe for more.